Police on the beat, something revellers in Newcastle's CBD will see a lot more of on Friday and Saturday nights.
We had an additional 2 teams of specialist police here, 10 police in total, deployed into this area to do beat policing and foot patrols, and that's an additional to our normal police that we would have down there on Friday and Saturday nights.
It comes after a spike in antisocial behaviour and violent attacks, including one here in Nobby's Beach car park last Thursday night, where an 18-year-old man was robbed and had a bottle smashed over his head. With more than 300 assaults reported in the Newcastle area in the past year alone, police will this week meet with licensees to restrict entry to pubs and clubs from 1 a.m.
Be responsible for your behaviour and look after the people you're with.
With every vote on the line, the Greens today recommended voters put Bryce Gaudry ahead of ALP candidate Jodie McKay and independent John Tate.
We don't know really what they stand for. Some of them were nominated by their Sydney headquarters.
Greens candidate Michael Osborne cited Gaudry's support for retaining the Newcastle rail line and renewable energy, plus the need to address climate change as reasons for the recommendation.
None of the other candidates have expressed a view that we do need to cap those coal exports and take real action on climate change.
While Sydney Greens have directed significant preferences to Labor, it's a mixed bag in the Hunter. Lake Macquarie preferences will flow to independent candidate Greg Piper, while in Swansea it favours the Democrats. The ALP gets Greens preferences in Port Stephens, Wallsend and Charlestown. Pre-poll and postal voting begins tomorrow. Christy Carter, NBN News.
Shark attack victim Bethany Hamilton always attracts a strong level of interest at surfing contests. And it's not just because of her amazing story of courage to return to the waves. The young Hawaiian is a great surfer and was expected to get through her opening heat, but the waves didn't come and her contest was over in less than half an hour. She was still a crowd favourite though, back on the beach. Another surprise in the opening heat of the Maitland Toyota Men's Open, with Merriweather's own Travis Lynch getting a start. On the waiting list, he got the heads up just 20 minutes before the heat. He waited a further 20 before going to work on his home break, with an 8.5 point ride, the best score of the Open men's event so far. And even better for him, he jumped from 4th to 2nd and into the next round. It was finals day for the Pro Juniors, and after Sully Fitzgibbon was a shock elimination in the semis this morning, it was anyone's final. Pint-size Laura Enever standing tall though to take the title. In the junior men, Drew McPherson started his final with a slashing opening ride that had Heath Josky playing catch-up from the start. A great second ride effectively carved McPherson's name on the Pro Junior trophy, his first Australian Pro Junior win.
It's a dream come true, really. I mean, to win in front of my friends and my family here at home, I couldn't ask for anything more. No.
His ranking skyrocketed, as did the wallet. The $2,800 prize purse, a king's ransom, compared to his pre-contest earnings of just $100.
300 assaults have been reported to police in inner Newcastle in the past year, but the Liquor Record claims that doesn't make the CBD area unsafe.
So unfortunately the media at the moment has portrayed the city as being unsafe and a violent place to visit, and that's not the case.
Police Commander Charles Haggart disagrees. Today he called a meeting with licensees to discuss ways to curb antisocial and violent behaviour among people loitering in the city on Friday and Saturday nights. While earlier closing times, improved transport, increased police patrols and CCTV were discussed, the Commander is pushing for a 1 a.m. lockout.
I probably would like to see the trial of a curfew, to perhaps see if we can get some people off the streets that are causing us the problems, and in that way, and then having a coordinated transport approach when they come out of the premises to get them out of Newcastle.
Hoteliers say they are willing to embrace the concept if it's part of a wider solution.
I think it's something that needs to be considered by the licensees, but it can only work if it works in conjunction with better transport, more police, better security.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
The next time you cross Parramatta's old Church Street Mall, you'd better watch your step. After 21 years, traffic is again flowing down the once thriving retail strip to make it safer and more profitable for business. And if it works in Parramatta, could it work in Newcastle? At least one councillor thinks so.
We're here looking at something that's incredibly important for the revitalisation of our city, and we're looking at a public safety issue, so we have to address it properly.
Shutting down the Hunter Street Mall has been an uphill battle for Councillor Barbara Gaudry, with the proposal knocked on the head 3 times before.
I think it will be really good for business, and I think they recognise that now.
Designed as a place for the people, there are some who think it should stay that way.
I think we need more places for people to be walking and bicycles rather than more places for cars.
No.
Okay.
I like it like this.
And for now, so does Council. Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
Labor sent Shadow Environment Minister Peter Garrett to the coalface to sell its new direction for Australia's coal industry. Mine workers at Cessnock's Ozstar Colliery told it's time for the nation to get on with the research, development and commercialisation of technology to reduce greenhouse gas emissions when coal is burnt to produce electricity.
I'm confident that Australian science, Australian workers, Australian management and Australian business working together on clean coal can get on top of this issue.
The ALP policy, based on the mining union strategy to secure coal's long-term future, has been developed with Hunter input.
Ratify Kyoto, increase the mandatory renewable energy target, introduce carbon trading and increase clean coal technology.
By Peter Garrett's side to show the policy has support from across the trade union movement, ACTU Secretary Greg Combay.
Unions stand up for coal miners' jobs. Coal mining communities around the country are extremely important for our economic future.
Agreement that the clean coal push needs to be ramped up puts pressure on coal companies to spend more on research, with the unions and Labor both having ideas on how to get the cash.
Leveraging $2 from the business community for every $1 that the Commonwealth puts up.
We've called for the mining companies to invest $1 a tonne. They're currently contributing 20 cents a tonne.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
You'll need much more than a lab coat to get into this laboratory, which builds materials and structures 2,000 times smaller than the size of a human hair.
It allows us to build these solar cells free of any contamination from dust. So that's what the new cleanroom facilities will give us.
This is nanotechnology, the science of building devices from single atoms and molecules. Essentially, they're making electronics known as semiconductors, and while that might seem old hat, the cutting-edge technology to size them almost inconceivably small is new for the University of Newcastle.
Well, this facility basically means we're on the world stage now. We can compete with any other research institution in the world.
Money from the Australian Research Council made the purchase possible, and while the opportunities it presents are endless, energy is the buzzword.
One of our main research focuses is looking at polymers, plastics that exist as liquids that can actually act as solar cells.
Their concept is that these could be mixed with paint and spread on the roofs of homes, even cars, to create electricity.
I think that we will be having these sorts of photovoltaic devices within the next 3 to 4 years.
For the first time since its inception in 1985, Surfest has moved from its home at Newcastle to Merewether Beach, but few places in this neck of the woods was good for surfing today. On his home break, Travis Lynch knew how to drag the best out of it, and a second in his opening heat was good enough to see him advance to the afternoon draw, where he followed up with a win to cement his place in day 3. Paul Parks was another to take advantage this morning. He actually won his opening heat before he was another to fall victim as conditions deteriorated. Teenager Drew McPherson spent the night celebrating his first ever Australian Pro Junior win before backing up in the Open event, and he got through his first heat, but it came to an end in the afternoon with the third placing not good enough. He was one of those to fall victim to former world number 6 Nathan Webster. The man they call Noodles hasn't surfed a competitive heat for a year, but it hardly showed. Webster actually made the final back here in 1996, but faces a big week ahead if he's to repeat the effort. Boardroom politics is never pretty, but the latest messy round at the Newcastle Knights could soon be over. Put simply, a deal has been struck with the Newcastle Rugby League aligned members of the board agreeing to halve their involvement, reducing their number from 4 board members to 2. In return, the local league will receive strong financial support, thought to be around $150,000 a season for the next decade, to assist league administration and management at club level. However, current CEO Ken Conway may be the big loser in all of this, with the said change in the board structure sure to affect his ongoing support. Preferring to stay out of things today, he did say he thought an amicable settlement is the best thing for the club. The team for the first match of the NRL season will be released tomorrow, but today they had a training session with a difference. The jet boat trip on Lake Macquarie would hardly have calmed any nerves ahead of the clash against the Bulldogs, but at least it would have taken their minds off the big game. Jim Callanan, NBN News. A proud new father these days, Greg Owens has been drawn back home, and despite some strong hit-outs for Adelaide, they agreed to let him go. It's been to the benefit of the Central Coast, who have been quick to add the attacking midfielder to their roster for next season. Golf and Toronto's Nathan Green finished in a share of 12th at the Pods Championship in Florida. Picking up just under $150,000, Green also broke back into the top 100 on the USPGA's Order of Merit. He's at 84. It's been an ordinary start to the Premier League Lawn Bowls series for Hunter clubs, with Raymond Terrace the only first-round winner. In the second round, it was Toronto to get the points, with Windale among those losing both their games. Backing up from a loss against Sydney's Tarrant Point, Windale couldn't hold out Dubbo's Western Warriors, who went on to win 2 out of the 3 rinks and the overall point score by 12 shots. Meanwhile, Broadmeadow continues to build towards the coming NBN Football League season, with another win in the President's Cup comp. They beat Phoenix 3-0 to remain undefeated in the pre-season tournament after 2 rounds. Edgeworth got back into the winners list, Lake Macquarie and Azuri also chalking up wins.
The callous and cowardly crime was committed in broad daylight. At around 4:30 yesterday afternoon, Frank Newbury was found by a customer lying on the floor of his store, covered in blood.
Certainly any type of attack of this nature, especially on an elderly gentleman, is something that we're very concerned about. It's a tragedy and it is sickening.
Mr Newbury was taken to John Hunter Hospital where he later died from his injuries. Meanwhile, forensic police established a crime scene around the Union Street shop. They then conducted a search of the surrounding area, including this school, hunting for a weapon and dusting for fingerprints. Today, a state homicide crime squad joined the investigation, trying to establish what instigated the deadly assault, with police confirming they are looking at robbery as a motive. It's the second time in 2 weeks an elderly person has died following a confrontation in the Newcastle suburb of Cooks Hill. 88-year-old Lily Wood was found dead on her veranda. 2 people are facing court for aggravated robbery.
I know the Wood matter was an elderly lady, however, as we've said, they're not linked. They are soft targets and yeah, it is a concern to us.
With no suspects at this stage, police say public help is vital to the investigation and want to hear from anyone who is in the area between 3 and 5 p.m. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Anne Graham from Merriweather was one of Frank Newbury's customers and a friend. Frank not only delivered groceries to Anne's house every week for the last 50 years, he even unpacked them.
And I've said to him, not so long ago, I said, you know, you can't die. I said, how would I manage without you? And he'd laugh.
The state government recognised Frank's 50 years of service as an independent grocer back in 1999 with a special visit from then Small Business Minister Sandra Norrie. We interviewed Frank back in 2001 when the council wanted to demolish his shop for a driveway into the Gibson Street parking station.
While I've got my marbles and I'm able to carry on and I feel that I'm doing a good job, well, that's what I'd like to do.
And it's that warm smile and friendly disposition that people will miss most. The latest death is like an aftershock in the suburb of Cooks Hill, where people are still saddened by the suspicious death 10 days ago of 88-year-old Lily Wood.
Initially, I think there's a shock, and then I think fear kicks in, and who's next and what's going to happen now.
I used to call him Saint Frank because his wife was severely crippled with arthritis. She couldn't move a finger, and he would have had to do everything for her, but there was never a word of complaint.
He'll be remembered for his service with a smile. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
In March last year, the Chapman family was anxiously waiting to move into their Cameron Park home when their dream was shattered, literally, by an explosion. Now, 1 year later, Darren Chapman's family is still waiting to settle in.
Yeah, well, on the day that the explosion happened here, Craig Bowman came in and he's the director of the company Valley Homes, and he said, look, don't worry, we'll take care of it, we'll get it sorted out as soon as possible. It's your family home, not a problem.
Despite such assurances, it's completely unlivable, and as you can see, there's much to be done. Craig Bowman says Valley Homes is proceeding as quickly as possible and blames much of the hold-ups on the insurer, CGU. In the meantime, Mr Chapman says he's already spent $13,000 on renting another home for his young family.
It's cost us a lot of money, a lot of frustration. The family we were a week and a half off moving in initially. And the stress that we've gone through for the last 12 months, fighting with insurance companies and Valley Homes, and this is where we're up to now. And I just need something done. I just need the house fixed.
Police say they haven't arrested anyone over the suspicious explosion, but they're seeking a man to help with their investigation. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
With dilapidated pavilions barricaded and other facilities to repair, it was decided to cancel this year's Newcastle Regional Show. A return all depends on securing state government funds.
We need about $2 million right now to make it safe and presentable and usable. We really need about $4 to $5 million to bring it up to the standard the city ought to expect.
A woodwork group has restored one pavilion, but the Show Society claims its overhaul has been thwarted by bills for the entertainment centre. While Sports Minister Sandra Norrie says the government has provided money for the showground's upkeep, George Keegan argues a major funding injection is now critical.
But if we do not get this funding and support from the government, it's gone, it's finished, and I'm afraid what will happen to the acreage that's here that is the showground.
Adding to those fears, speculation that the Yemma government will create a super trust for the showground and the International Sports Centre after the election, possibly ending the current administration of the showground.
That super trust will then have to have a bureaucracy to manage it all. And so the voluntary assistance from hundreds of people like myself go out the window. And yeah, sure, we'll lose control.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
Another case of sitting, waiting, wishing on the sand at Merewether this morning with plenty of swell but not a lot of shape. James Aythorne showed no fear in one of the final heats of round 3 to knock out teenage Gold Coast sensation Brendan Leckie before falling himself late in round 4. After scraping into the event as a reserve, hometown favourite Travis Lynch was well prepared for round 4. Taking the local road out the back, Lynch found 6 and 7 point rides to cruise into round 5. Waiting for him will be defending Queensland champion Dave Reardon-Smith, who finished second in his high-scoring heat. No such luck for Lennox head surfer James Wood, eliminated by Coolangatta's Brent Dorrington. Tour veteran Nathan Webster's good form continued as the 33-year-old Sydney surfer progressed after a gutsy second-place effort. Conditions for Surfest and the Women's Midori Pro are expected to improve over the next 2 days as the big names of the sport prepare to hit the water. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
Anointed as the long-term replacement for Danny Badiris, teenage hooker Terence Siu said all along he didn't believe he'd be in the season opener until the team was announced. But he and winger James McManus need not wait any longer. With confirmation, they'll start on Sunday.
Terence's form is just, and as has Jim McManus on the wing. Jimmy's been great right through our pre-season, and they just demanded a go at it.
Outside of their inclusion, the back row and who made the bench caused most debate in the selection room. 2 players are on standby, but there's no doubt about Andrew Johns or Adam McDougall. Along with Todd Polglaze, the Mad Dog returns after several up and down years at the Rabbitohs.
Now I'm going to be running off the likes of, Danny Badiris and Andrew Johns again and stuff like that. There's no reason why I can't sort of play better football once again.
The result no doubt important for the coach too in his first game at Newcastle.
You only get one chance to make a first impression. So in the season's terms, it would be great for us to make a great first impression. But me, I'm more inclined for the lasting impression.
As the dust continues to settle on the boardroom stoush at the Newcastle Knights, the Wests Group is set to expand its support of the football club, with news expected by Thursday that it will be the short sponsor. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
It's regarded as the strongest league in the world, but by 2008, Australia's national competition will cease to exist. A new Trans-Tasman competition with 5 clubs each from Australia and New Zealand will push the sport to new heights, with substantial financial backing from cable television. But some claim the league will hamper Australia's development.
Australia obviously has a massive population in comparison to New Zealand, and yet they're basically having the same amount of teams from each country, so that to me isn't fair.
Netball Australia has directed that only one side from each state will be considered, leaving Netball New South Wales to choose between the Hunter and Sydney, a decision Jaeger's representatives believe doesn't have to be made.
Certainly we have the capacity to host 2 teams. If that's not the case and it does go to a merged situation, only time will tell.
Despite finishing outside the top 5 last season, the Hunters coach feels the club could handle the Kiwis on a weekly basis.
We played one of the New Zealand teams at the weekend up in Queensland in a pre-season tournament and won quite comfortably by 16 goals.
A sentiment echoed by a former Jaeger.
I still would think that the 5th placed team in the Australian competition would beat the top New Zealand team or come very close to it.
Netball New South Wales will make its decision at a meeting on Sunday, with an announcement to be made on Monday. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
The trio were arrested and charged last August when police swooped on 5 locations, including this home at Woodbury, during a police investigation dubbed Strike Force Islander. 47-year-old Randall Barker and his 44-year-old wife Christine were taken into custody as a result of the raid. Today in Newcastle local court, Mr Barker pleaded guilty to supplying methamphetamine, also known as speed, on an ongoing basis at Woodbury during March last year. He also entered a plea to 3 charges of supplying the drug in April 2006. Christine Barker admitted to Magistrate Michael Morahan that she had knowingly taken part in the supply of the drug between March and August of last year. Brett Gary Crosdale, aged 36 of Madawi, was charged along with the Barkers as a result of the Strike Force Islander sting. He today entered a guilty plea to supplying 718 grams of methamphetamine between Williamtown and Woodbury during a 5-month period last year. Brett Crosdale, Randall and Christine Barker have now been committed to appear before the Newcastle District Court next week. Gary Blair, NBN News.
The state government was under fire from almost all quarters last night. The source of their frustration, the Glendale Transport Interchange, with a key component, the road overpass, left out of the government's plan.
I must admit all council was absolutely shocked when the RTA lodged their development application for that transport interchange. That was the first any of us knew that the overpass was deleted from even the DA. Absolute act of mastery on behalf of the state government.
Organised by the Hunter Business Chamber, the forum allowed candidates the opportunity to present their policies in front of a small, attentive crowd.
The state government needs to commit to phasing out coal in a just way, which means we don't expand the coal industry, but instead of expanding the coal industry, we expand our renewable energies.
Others highlighted disparities in the provision of infrastructure spending over the last 10 years.
For example, in transport, $495 per person over 10 years in the Hunter, $1,895 per person in Sydney. Health, $458 for the Hunter, $880 in Sydney.
Tonight, the candidates' forum shifts to Newcastle Panthers for the seats of Wallsend and Newcastle. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
In recent months, the number of cats at the RSPCA's Rutherford shelter has swelled to over 100. Every cat cage is full, with felines needing a home. The dog lounge has been taken over by moggies, and there's even a temporary shelter in the foyer to help house them all.
We've got them everywhere, so the place is literally crawling with cats and kittens.
The breeding season traditionally extends from September to February, but shelter staff say for the last few years they've received unwanted newborns well into March and April.
Some sort of change in the weather, in our climate situation, has caused them to be breeding longer. They do breed depending on the number of hours of sunlight in the day, so whether there's some sort of climate effect there, maybe another effect of the climate change.
1-year-old Missy has spent half her life at the shelter waiting for someone to fall in love with her and take her home. But the sad reality is that of the 3,000 cats admitted to the shelter each year, 2,000 will never leave.
We're at the point where we've got cats and kittens still coming in and nowhere to move them to, so we're going to have to start euthanasing happy, healthy kittens just through a numbers game.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
These scorch marks are the only external evidence of this morning's fire at the Munmora Power Station. 9 crews from both the New South Wales and Rural Fire Brigades, as well as a hazardous materials unit, were called in to control the blaze, which firefighters believe was caused by an oil leak in one of the station's 2 300-megawatt generators.
It was really a vapour explosion, I guess, where the oil had evaporated and that vapour caught alight.
While it took just 1 hour to douse the flames, crews remain at the station tonight, monitoring the situation. It's the 4th serious incident in the past 5 months at a Delta Electricity-owned Central Coast power station. In November, the Vales Point station was evacuated of 150 workers after an explosion sparked a fire in an electricity transformer. 3 months later, and another fire broke out at the same station, while workers were trying to dismantle an old transformer. Then, last month, 100 litres of sulphuric acid spilled from Munmora Power Station into the Central Coast Lake system. Delta Electricity today denied the incidents were the result of maintenance issues, claiming they were a coincidence. They also said the 3 fires and acid spill were all unrelated and subject to inquiries. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
While the midweek scheduling of the Newmarket Handicap leaves the crowd looking a little thin, the long-running Broadmeadow fixture has no problems attracting the big-name trainers and jockeys. Run for 52 years, the race day's almost twice as old as Lake Macquarie racecaller Nat Wallace, who dusted off the binoculars after 12 months out of the game in the name of exposure.
And it's the sort of thing that you can't stop doing, you need to be at it all the time. So it's a privilege to be invited here on Newmarket Day because it's such a great day and there's such a big audience, a lot of people punting, and to be able to call a race just a great thrill for me.
There certainly is plenty of interest in the feature, with previous Newmarket winners going on to much bigger things.
Well, in the last 10 years, 2 winners, Secret Savings in '97 and Pateza 2 years ago, won our race and then won the Doncaster.
The crowd swelled for race 7, with former world champion Kostya watching on as another champion made it look easy on the track. No doubt the John Hawkes stable has big plans for Dan Zippo after it picked up its 6th win from 15 starts.
He's in the Doncaster, but John, he'll gauge him how he does the next 2 or 3 weeks. We've got a bit of time up our sleeve. He may not need another run.
Diamond Sun and High C rounded out the trifecta. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
Already leading the Australasian Pro Junior Series, there was plenty expected of Sunshine Coast surfer Mitch Colborne, and didn't he deliver?
I just caught a right-hander and paddled straight back out to the left peak, and I don't know, I just when I took off, I kind of looked down the line and seen a bit of an air section. I thought, I'm just going to go it.
Put simply, all of that equates to a perfect 10-point ride in a heat where the judges really were spoiled for choice. Just moments before, the 20-year-old set things up with an 8-point wave. Then towards the end, he grabbed a 9 to finish with 19, the highest heat score of the tournament so far. Waves like that were hard to come by, which made for real battles at times, but Lake Munmora's Michael Spencer never looked troubled. He progresses to tomorrow's round of 96 in what is his first event of the season in the World Qualifying Series.
I've got no juniors to worry about this year, so I can just tackle this full time, so pretty excited.
Hawaiian Dusty Payne was among the internationals to advance early this morning, while in the women's it was the Stephanie Gilmore show. The 19-year-old from Kingscliff scored the second highest score of the day, and in doing so eliminated junior champion Sally Fitzgibbons.
I guess it wasn't her day, and it was kind of difficult to find the right waves out there, and I just managed to do that, and Sally just wasn't in the right place at the right time.
So I don't want to finish another race where I have to be rushed off to hospital. So after finishing healthy, my next goal is then to finish strongly.
Things are starting to look up for James Nitties after what's been a long recovery from serious illness.
When the confidence comes back, it all comes back.
And what a comeback it'd be should he prove himself in the United States. He'll have to pre-qualify for each nationwide tour event, and if he does, a top 3 finish in the early tournaments will pretty much see his name all over a rich tour card. The same one held by fellow hunter professional and friend Nick Flanagan.
I'd love to be on the tour, and I know I'm good enough to be playing on the nationwide tour. It's the hardest thing is getting on, and as soon as I get on, I know I'll stay on. I won't need to go through all the trouble of Monday qualifying.
You wouldn't notice it at training, but Nitties says it's been his short game which has let him down. Going close, very close to a breakthrough win at the New Zealand Championship last month, where he finished 5th overall.
It's a case of one man's trash is another man's treasure. Although this rusty cast iron fish belly rail doesn't look too impressive, for those interested in rail history and Newcastle's early coal mining days, this is the Holy Grail.
Well, I think nationally it's of enormous significance because, as I say, this was the first railway in Australia.
That particular Newcastle coal line was dismantled and rebuilt 12 years later on another site nearby, and that's where the piece of rail line was tracked down.
And we know that because I've been to the AA Company archives in Canberra. We have references and also rails like this were simply not manufactured after the 1820s, 1830s.
And while the cast iron artefact will be preserved in a museum, today's show and tell didn't go quite to plan. It will be on display during celebrations for the 150th anniversary of the Great Northern Railway at the end of the month. And in other city news, the Hunter Street Mall has been transformed into a temporary art space. 8,000 orange and pink pool noodles have been wrapped around those infamous shade structures once used for the mall markets. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Darren Peachman was last seen leaving his Harvard Street home late on Saturday night. 90 minutes later, in the early hours of Sunday morning, a passing taxi driver discovered the 36-year-old father of two lying beside the road. He was unconscious and suffering serious head injuries. Mr. Peachman was rushed to nearby John Hunter Hospital, where he later died. Investigations by Waratah detectives led officers to execute a search warrant at a house in Hinkler Street, Mayfield, where they seized a number of items. Last night, a 22-year-old man walked into Waratah Police Station and was subsequently arrested and charged with the murder. William Pocock today made a brief appearance before the Newcastle local court. His solicitor, John Anthony, told Magistrate Cole Elliott there would be no application for bail. The circumstances surrounding the charge were not discussed, nor were any police facts placed on the public record. Magistrate Elliott formally refused bail and remanded Pocock in custody, adjourning the charge for mention in early May. Gary Blair, NBN News.
I'm dismayed that there are people out there in the community that can attack students, children like this. I think that's horrifying.
It was the Bob the Builder and Eric the Roads Minister show near Bulahdelah today. They were both there to inspect the start of jointly funded work on the next 23 kilometres of highway upgrade between Karua and Bulahdelah. But a little further south, there's still community concern about the safety of the Tea Gardens turnoff. Even though it was recently remodelled as part of the highway upgrade, locals say an overpass is needed to avoid cars crossing two lanes of southbound traffic.
We'll be agitating and lobbying because we believe that within 12 months there'll be an absolute serious accident right here.
But the Roads Minister says a flyover isn't needed.
As it stands now, the independent advice clearly says for at least the next 10 years it's an adequate intersection to provide important safety to everybody that utilises it.
Bob Baldwin says the Commonwealth would fund 50% of the cost.
They can spend $25 million delaying the opening of a tunnel in Sydney for political purposes. They can't spend half of $15 million, their contribution, on building a flyover for the people of Tea Gardens and Hawk's Nest.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
We've also got a program called SABRE, or Smoke Alarm Battery Replacement for the Elderly, where members of the Fire Brigade will come to homes and change the battery for elderly residents.
Almost perfect conditions for the morning heats with 2-metre waves on offer. Byron Bay's Jared Sullivan made a slow start, but eventually had the crowd watching in awe. The 23-year-old making some huge turns before performing a disappearing act to score the event's second perfect 10.
I was kind of struggling at the start, just couldn't find the right wave, and I snuck up the inside and managed to get that thing, and it's an unbelievable wave. It was, had lots of wall and then it got barreled on the inside, so I was stoked.
As the day wore on, conditions began to deteriorate. Unfazed, Bonnie Hill's Darren O'Rafferty quickly adapted to score the round's best heat score. Lake Munmora's Michael Spencer continued his impressive run, overcoming a quality trio of international competitors. Next up, crowd favourite Matt Hoy, but despite the home break advantage, the Novocastrian's appearance was no more than a cameo, as the Merewether break proved unforgiving. No such problems for Lennox Head's Adam Melling, who led the heat from start to finish.
It wasn't too hard to stay in position, but it makes it a lot harder for your turns and stuff with the chops on the face of the wave.
With the nor'easter wreaking havoc, the last 24 in the Midori Pro hit the waves. World number 2 Melanie Redmond-Carr did enough to advance, but fellow World Tour surfer Stephanie Gilmore was forced to abandon ship and hope of claiming the 5-star event. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
Both were told of their selection in the Socceroos squad on Tuesday, but given the secrecy, neither really knew of the other's appointment until this morning at training. For Nick Carl, it's been a long time coming after making his national debut in 2004, now determined more than ever to prove his old critics wrong.
I think they've realised that I do put in a lot of hard work as well. I think that's one part of my game that always got pointed out, that I didn't work hard enough, which I always disagreed with.
The talented midfielder really has put selectors on notice this season. Named the A-League's best in picking up the Johnny Warren medal.
Yeah, look, there's still a lot of work to be done. There's so much improvement I can do, and I've got to be on top of my game if I want to stay there.
He'll be joined by Jade North, who admits the call-up was a bonus, given A-League players are in the off-season, yet great timing with the Asian Cup looming.
Like, my name's there now, it's if you get the opportunity, you got to take it. It's a great time to try and cement a place in that team.
Melbourne Victory's Archie Thompson completes the A-League contingent in the 20-man squad, which goes into camp in Hong Kong on Monday. He is the boy from Darwin, born in Scotland, who's found a home in Newcastle and a place in the Knights' top 13.
I just started playing rugby league after I played a couple of years of cricket when I came to Australia, and the comp's not big in Darwin, but there's a few players there, and Warren Smalls picked me up at the Nationals.
From there, 21-year-old centre-turned-winger James McManus worked his way through the junior ranks, then Premier League.
Being able to play my first grade game was a dream come true, so I'm just looking forward to it.
He's one of 2 rookies who'll make their debut against the Bulldogs on Sunday, with Terrence CU to wear the number 9 jumper.
We don't hand them out like toffee apples, jerseys are earned. These boys have earned their shot at it. The fact that they haven't played before is not their fault. It's just their time has come.
As for the Adam McDougall saga, it's understood Souths will only grant a release for him to play for the Knights if he'll give back a solid silver bunny given to him by Russell Crowe last season.
The bunny rabbit will be returned.
And this really is the final block in the puzzle to really make sure the Knights are going to be a competitive team.
It's Australia's largest surfing event and showcases Newcastle to the world for 13 days of spectacular surfing action. There's 800 surfers from 13 countries, along with their support crews and hundreds of spectators converging on the city for Surffest. But it's hoped their focus remains firmly on the waves.
I think thank God for the waves and the great surfing, because I don't think we do much to complement what nature provides and what the human element's providing in terms of our assets.
In Council's defence, it does have a committee looking at a beach assets framework, a type of management plan for the coastline, but they've been meeting for 2 years. Councillor O'Neill is on that committee and is frustrated at the lack of action, with no kiosks or cafes at either Merriweather Baths or Dixon Park, while Surf House still sits in limbo.
I'm definitely embarrassed, particularly when I look to my right and see Surf House standing there, and the pigeons really soaking up the view. They're enjoying themselves.
A $130,000 report recommended Council commercialise some assets, and while that's in the planning, Council is missing out on thousands of unrealised dollars.
Where Council's falling apart is they aren't using partnerships. Now, there's people crying out to establish these facilities along the beach, and we've just ignored them.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
With a jab of a spear and a symbolic passing of earth between the Awabakal Land Council, state government and development companies Urban Pacific and Landcom, the traditional owners of these 45 hectares gave their blessing for the land to be transformed into a residential precinct. The area will soon contain 700 new homes and 2,000 residents.
Young families are finding it hard to get into their first home, but at least the provision of these lots is very significant and important to help that happen.
Although the asking price for a house and land package here could be too steep for some.
We're looking at a range from around about $400,000 to $500,000 depending on size of lot.
And there's still the matter of public transport to sort out.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have a government bus service, a regular bus service operating through Fletcher or Maryland, and that's still a major deficiency.
Meanwhile, after a labour of love from parents, the business community and a $150,000 federal government grant, Glendon School's hydrotherapy pool is finally finished and open for special needs students.
Many are confined to wheelchairs and the scourges of gravity affect them, and to be in a pool, to be able to have fun and enjoy themselves like other kids is a real bonus.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
This shiny beast may have been named Streetcar of the Year, but it's these beauties that really draw the attention. Hot rods, unique and available in every colour of the rainbow.
You can do a lot of things with street rods, with hot rods. We put big wheels on them, big motors. The restrictions on street machines are a little bit different.
72-year-old John Green's fully restored 1947 Ford Anglia flat-top Tudor model has been a 9-year labour of love. Built in the garage of his Nelson Bay home, the pensioner has done everything from installing the imported NASCAR engine to panel-beating mudguards and even mixing the paint.
Yeah, I built the whole car myself. It was just a rusted old wreck. And I've got about 10 mudguards at home to prove that I made my own.
You'd think building a car without any mechanical know-how would have been the biggest challenge, but apparently not.
The garage is on a 9-inch slope, so I had to be careful I didn't run over myself every time I jacked it up.
$25,000 later and no sign of stopping.
It goes pretty hard. It's putting out nearly 700 horsepower at the moment. Hopefully by Christmas we'll have a supercharger on it.
And from there, the sky is the limit.
I think with something like this, there's no limit. I think you just keep going and going and going. And it takes me a lot longer than others because I've got to save up everything to be able to do anything on it.
120 hot rods and street performance cars will go on show at the Newcastle Entertainment Centre from 8 a.m. tomorrow. Christy Carter, NBN News.
Day 6 of the Maitland Toyota Pro and yet another change in the surf. Such were the conditions that competitors were lured away from the normal point break at Merewether to further north along the beach, and you could see why. It didn't always work out for everyone, but Mick Fanning liked what he saw and followed suit. After a quiet start to his opening heat of the event, a 9.93 was more than enough to see him rocket into first place.
Yeah, it's sort of an event I really enjoy coming to, get really looked after down here by everyone in Newey, and it's just fun.
It shows. Riding a wave of confidence at present, the current world number 1 racked up the highest heat score of the day and looks set to turn 3 contest wins here into 4.
You know, I'm just out there having fun, and if the waves come, the waves come. If not, so be it.
Defending champion Nico Paderats hit the water for the first time today as well, but it was Australian and 2003 champion here, Dayan Neve, that stood tall in that heat. The Brazilian caught the barrel ride he thought would sneak him through, and while happy, he couldn't convince the judges, as his title defence lasted 1 heat. The field in the women's Midori Pro event was whittled down to just 8, and while top seed Melanie Redmond-Carr is among them, the loss of Rebecca Woods today came as a huge shock. A 3-time winner here, she'll have to wait another 12 months before she can add to that count. Jim Callanan, NBN News. For several months, Ken Conway has helped draft an across-the-board policy for NRL clubs to handle players caught using drugs. The committee he was on decided a 3-strikes policy was the way to go, but says once it was rejected by the NRL CEO David Gallop, several club CEOs followed suit.
I genuinely believe that we did get the best medical advice, and the policy's supposed to be about detection, prevention and rehabilitation. And I stood on my digs, basically.
That's not to say the Knights won't accept a revamped policy, but he won't be on the committee that drives it. To matters football, and there's little doubt the Knights forwards know what they're in for this Sunday, with the Bulldogs boasting a menacing pack.
They're a good yardstick for any team in the competition to see where they're at. As you say, 5 internationals, and we've probably got 1.
It's going to be an enjoyable challenge, I suppose. We've trained all off-season and to get ready for this game. So, we're sort of as ready as we're going to be.
The skipper knows there will be plenty of traffic heading his way as well in what will be Andrew John's first match of the year.
Willie and Sonny will be... Geez, I can't wait for that. They'll be picking me out in defence. But, mate, it happens every week and it's happened my whole career. And you ask any halfback, it happens to them. So, I look forward to it. Can't wait.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.